I sat down on the white-painted wooden chair, facing my parents and my two younger brothers in the familiar kitchen I once considered home. The aroma of pot roast and garlic bread filled the air, evoking memories of family dinners from my childhood. But tonight, something felt different. Nathan and Lucas, my twin brothers, leaned back in their chairs, their expressions triumphant. My parents, David and Margaret, exchanged a quick glance before my mother spoke, her voice carefully composed. "We want to talk to you about an important decision." I set my fork down, feeling the tension rise within me. "We've finalized our will," my father continued, his tone steady but lacking its usual warmth, "and we want you to hear it from us now, so there's no confusion later." Nathan leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, a smug smirk forming on his lips. "To put it simply, everything goes to us." I froze. "What?" Lucas repeated it, his tone light, as if delivering an unimportant announcement. "Mom and Dad are leaving this house, the beach condo, and all their assets to us. You get nothing." The room suddenly fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic from the quiet suburban street outside. I turned to my mother, hoping she would deny what I had just heard. But she only gave a small, firm nod. "We think this is for the best," she said, clutching the napkin in her lap. "You have a stable career, a solid income, but Nathan and Lucas are still finding their way. They need more support." I turned to my father, waiting for an explanation, some sign of hesitation, but he simply stared down at his glass of water, avoiding my gaze. Pain surged through my chest, mixed with rising anger. I had done everything for them. For over a decade, I had paid a large portion of their mortgage, covered countless medical bills, and even helped Nathan and Lucas multiple times when they couldn't handle their own finances. And now, this was how they repaid me? "So after everything I've done, you've decided I don't deserve anything?" My voice wavered despite my efforts to keep it steady, but I couldn't hide the deep hurt behind my words. My mother sighed, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Evelyn, you always make everything about money." I clenched my hands under the table, the sharp sting of betrayal piercing through me. "It's not about money," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It's about fairness, about how I've always been there whenever you needed me, but now, just because I'm independent, because I don't rely on you, I have no value to this family?" Nathan let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic. No one forced you to help. You just liked playing the martyr." Lucas chuckled too, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough money at us, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us?" His words hit me like a slap across the face. I turned to my parents, waiting for them to correct him, to reprimand him for his cruelty. But nothing. They stayed silent. And in that silence, I understood everything. I swallowed hard, the pain swelling in my throat. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself. "All right," I said, my voice even. "If that's your decision, then I have one of my own." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what's that?" I pushed my chair back and stood up, my heart pounding. "From now on, don't expect anything from me." I turned away from the dinner table, leaving behind their stunned expressions. The scent of pot roast and garlic bread, once comforting, now felt empty and meaningless. As I walked out the door, no one stopped me. No one called my name. No hesitation. And I knew, in that moment, everything had changed. I stepped out of the house I had grown up in, but this time there was no sense of familiarity, no lingering attachment. The warmth of family dinners and childhood security had long faded. The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that couldn't be undone. The night air was crisp, but I felt a burning heat rise to my temples. Driving home, I didn't turn on the radio like I usually did. I needed the silence to process everything. Why was I even surprised? Hadn't I always known that, in their eyes, I was nothing more than their financial safety net? Back in my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, my hands trembling as I unlocked my phone. The conversation replayed in my head, every word cutting deeper. Nathan and Lucas were getting everything. And me? The one who had paid for their mistakes? Who had covered Nathan's tuition every time he switched majors? Who had sent Lucas money when he wanted a new car for his social media image? I was left with nothing. I opened my banking app. The numbers stared back at me like a brutal reminder. $1,900 every month. The amount I had been sending to my parents to cover their mortgage and expenses. Another $1,200 for Nathan and Lucas every time they called, complaining about money problems. My parents said I was successful and didn't need help. But what would happen to them without my support? Could they even keep their home? I hovered my finger over the automatic transfers section. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. For years, I had accepted this burden as my responsibility. But this was their choice. They didn't need me. They had made that clear. No one was forcing me to continue. 1 second. 2 seconds. I pressed cancel. A notification popped up. Recurring payments successfully stopped. A wave of emotion crashed over me. Anger, bitterness, but also something else. Relief. I set my phone down, sinking into the couch, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders that I had carried for far too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, replaying the past years in my head. The vacations I had turned down to cover their mortgage, the late nights working overtime to send Nathan tuition money, the sacrifices I had made believing they mattered. But now that I needed just 1 ounce of recognition, 1 sign that I was appreciated, they couldn't even give me that. The next morning, my phone rang non-stop. Ma? I hesitated before answering. Evelyn, did you cancel this month's payment? Her voice was sharp with worry, but she masked it with that familiar tone of disappointment. I took a deep breath. Yes, Mom. Because I realized I don't have to do this anymore. She was silent for a moment. What do you mean? Family supports each other. You know we rely on that money for the bills. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. Mom, family only matters to you when I'm paying for everything. I've helped for years, but in the end, I still don't mean anything to you. You're being selfish, Evelyn. Her voice rose. Why are you acting this way, just because of the will? Everything isn't about money. I laughed, but not out of amusement. Not about money. I was the one paying the bills for you, for this entire family. If money doesn't matter, then why don't you ask Nathan and Lucas to take care of you instead? Silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could picture my mother's face. Angry, frustrated at being confronted. I can't believe you're acting like this, she finally said. This isn't the Evelyn I raised. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight in my chest. Mom, this is me. But you never really saw me. I hung up before she could say anything else. Standing there in my apartment, emotions swirled inside me. I knew she would call again. Dad might try too. And Nathan and Lucas would definitely jump in with their mockery or accusations. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel obligated to answer. I was no longer the family's ATM. I was no longer the only one carrying the weight. I had let go, and it was the best decision I had ever made. I set my phone down on the table, feeling both weightless and heavy at the same time. Mom had said exactly what I expected, accusing me of selfishness, of betrayal, of abandoning the family. But what she didn't realize was that I had heard those words so many times that they had lost all meaning. I looked around my apartment, suddenly seeing it in a new light. It was no longer just a stopover between work and endless bank transfers to my family. It was mine. The only space where I didn't have to carry anyone else's burdens. I opened my laptop, pulled up my bank statement. The list of monthly expenses stared back at me. Transfers to my parents, to Nathan, to Lucas. A constant reminder of the dependency they had placed on me. Not anymore. I canceled them one by one, each confirmation feeling like a sharp, clean cut from the past. $1,900 for the mortgage, gone. $600 for utilities, gone. I sat there, staring at the screen, which now showed no active recurring payments. And for the first time in years, I felt free. But strangely, an emptiness crept in. I had spent so much time, so much effort being the responsible daughter, the one who carried what Nathan and Lucas were never asked to. Now, without those obligations, what was I supposed to do with myself? I stood up, poured a glass of water, sipping it slowly. Outside the window, the city buzzed on, life moving forward. And yet, I felt like I had just stepped into an entirely new world, one where I could set the rules. My phone vibrated, a message from Lucas. "What the hell are you doing? Nathan just told me you cut off the money. Do you think this is funny?" I read it, but didn't reply. A few minutes later, another message popped up, from Nathan this time. "You're a traitor. Don't expect anyone in this family to see you as one of us ever again." I smirked, not because I was happy, but because I finally saw the truth. I was never truly part of this family. I was just their sponsor. I put my phone down, stepped onto the balcony. The night breeze brushed against my skin, cool and refreshing. I took a deep breath. I had done the right thing, and nothing would make me turn back now. The next morning, my phone rang non-stop. I didn't even need to check the screen to know who it was. Slowly, I picked it up. Mom's voice burst through the speaker before I could even say hello. "Evelyn, what are you thinking?" she nearly shouted, her voice a mixture of anger and desperation. "Why did you cancel the payments? You know we need that money to cover the bills." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I've helped enough." "Helped? You're abandoning your family. Have you even thought about how this affects us? We sacrificed so much for you, and this is how you repay us?" I let out a dry chuckle. "Sacrificed? Do you not see the irony in that? If I owe you for raising me, haven't I already paid you back by funding this entire family?" Mom hesitated, but then her voice turned sharper. "You've changed, Evelyn. You let money control you." "No, Mom, you let money control you," I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. "But I'm not your personal bank anymore." She exhaled loudly and hung up without another word. I stared at the screen. Then more messages flashed. "Nathan, you're ungrateful. Mom's crying because of you. Lucas, you think you're so smart? You'll regret this one day. Nathan, don't bother showing up at our parents' funeral when they're gone." I read each message, anger bubbling beneath my skin. Not one apology, not one question about why I had done it. They didn't care how they had treated me all these years. They were just mad because I had stopped funding their lives. The phone rang again. Dad this time. I let it ring. It kept ringing. I turned off the ringer, then went into my settings. Lock. Nathan. Lock. Lucas. Mom. Block. Yeah. Block. Once I was done, I set my phone down, closed my eyes, and exhaled. Silence filled my apartment, a rare and unfamiliar peace. No more ringing, no more messages filled with guilt trips, no more manipulation. I stepped onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air. This peace felt foreign, but also incredibly freeing. For the first time in years, I was truly free. 3 weeks passed in silence. No more relentless calls, no more guilt-laden messages from Mom. I began to believe they had finally accepted the truth, that I was no longer their financial safety net. Then, on a Friday evening, a message appeared on my screen. "Family meeting, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Don't be late." Short, cold, no explanation. I looked at my mother's message, feeling a sinking sensation in my chest. A part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, smaller yet persistent, whispered that maybe this was the last chance for things to get better. Maybe, after everything that had happened, they truly wanted to have an honest conversation with me. I decided to go. As I stepped into my parents' house, the tension in the living room was suffocating. Nathan and Lucas were already seated on the couch, arms crossed, their expressions cold. My father stood near the fireplace, while my mother sat in the armchair, her eyes red and puffy as if she had been crying. Before I could speak, my mother did. "Evelyn, I don't understand you anymore." Her voice trembled. "How much further do you want to go in destroying this family?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" My father let out a heavy sigh. "You've put us in serious financial trouble. If you keep being stubborn, your mother is going to break down." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So now I'm the reason Mom is exhausted? What about all those years I carried this family financially? She seemed just fine then." Nathan scoffed, shaking his head. "You always make everything about money. Do you really think the world revolves around you?" Lucas leaned forward, arms crossed in defiance. "Come on, you have a good job, a comfortable life. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? You're just paying the price for being selfish." Their words cut deep. I had come here hoping for a genuine conversation, but all I was met with was manipulation and pressure. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "If this is why you called me here, then don't waste your time. I'm not coming back." My mother's face went blank. "What did you just say?" I stood up, taking one last look around the house. "I have done everything I could to be a part of this family. But if my worth to you is only measured by how much money I bring in, then I don't need that kind of love." No one said a word as I turned and walked toward the door. No one stopped me. I left, for good this time. 2 days later, when I returned to my apartment late at night, I immediately sensed something was wrong. My front door had been sealed shut with industrial foam, covering the doorframe and handle. I reached out and touched the hardened material, solid and cold. Someone had done this on purpose. I took a step back, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't some harmless prank. This was an intentional act to keep me out of my own home. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and checked the hallway security camera. I fast-forwarded through the footage from earlier that evening. And then, there it was. Lucas, wearing a baseball cap and a hoodie, but his posture and stride were unmistakable. He smirked as he held the foam spray can, carefully filling every crack and crevice of my door. My hands trembled with rage. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. When the officers arrived, I handed over the footage as evidence. One of them nodded as he watched the video. "Do you want to press charges?" I gripped my phone tightly, a chill running down my spine. If I let this go, it would only escalate. Lucas wasn't just angry. He was willing to cross the line to retaliate. I took a deep breath, my gaze firm. I want him held accountable. The next day, my phone rang again. I ignored it. Then Dad. Then Nathan. Finally, I picked up. "Evelyn, your brother got called in by the police. How could you do this to your own family?" My father's voice was harsh, but I responded calmly. "Lucas vandalized my property. If he doesn't want to face charges, he needs to pay for the damages." My father's tone dropped. "How much?" I didn't hesitate. $3,000. "How could you extort your own brother like this?" I let out a dry chuckle. "It's not extortion, Dad. It's called consequences." The next morning, my account received a $3,000 transfer, with a bitter note attached. "I never want to see you again." I read the message and felt nothing. A notification lit up my phone. A message from a distant relative. "Evelyn, is this true? People are saying you abandon your family even though they're struggling." I frowned. Another message came in. "Evelyn, how could you cut off your parents and brothers like this? They took care of you your whole life." I opened social media and immediately understood what was happening. My mother had been spreading a completely false story. She had written a long Facebook post claiming that I had turned my back on my family in their time of need, that I was selfish, only cared about myself, and had left my aging parents and struggling brothers with nothing. People who didn't know the full story flooded the comments, offering sympathy to her and vilifying me. I scrolled through the responses. So sad when successful children forget where they came from. Parents sacrifice everything for their kids, and this is the thanks they get? Evelyn must have let money get to her head. Anger flared in my chest. Not because of the stranger's passing judgment, but because my own family had rewritten the narrative, turning me into the villain. They didn't mention that I had paid the majority of my parents' mortgage. They didn't say that I had covered tuition bills and even personal expenses for Nathan and Lucas. They left out the fact that Lucas vandalized my apartment and that I had to call the police to protect myself. They only painted the image of a heartless daughter who turned her back on her family. I sat in silence for a few minutes, thinking, should I stay quiet? Ignore everything and let them control the narrative? No. I had endured their manipulation for far too long. I opened my app and tapped on New Post. If my family wants to make this public, then let me tell the truth. And I started writing. I laid it all out. Every dollar I had sent over the past 10 years. The money I had spent to help them keep their house, pay for tuition. Even the funds Nathan and Lucas used for new cars and vacations. I spoke about how they had always seen me as an ATM, not as a daughter or a sister. I exposed how Lucas had sealed my apartment door with industrial foam, forcing me to involve the police. I didn't turn my back on my family. My family never saw me as part of them, unless I was bringing in money. And now, I choose to stand up for myself. I hit post. Within hours, my post caused an uproar. Relatives started asking questions. Some commented surprised because they had never heard these things before. An aunt messaged me privately, asking if it was true that I had financially supported my family for years. Some extended family members even began calling out my mother for twisting the truth. But the strongest reaction came from my immediate family. Mom called immediately. I answered. Her voice was so furious she was nearly incoherent. Evelyn, what the hell did you just do? I remained calm. I told the truth, Mom. If you have the right to tell your version, so do I. She was breathless. You're humiliating this family. Your father is so ashamed he won't even leave the house. Have you thought about how this makes Nathan and Lucas feel? I clenched my phone tightly. Did they think about how I felt when Lucas vandalized my home? Did they think about me when I was breaking my back to pay their bills? She went silent. But then, as always, she twisted the situation. You're destroying this family. Her voice grew cold. If you do this, don't expect to come back. We are no longer family. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Mom, you destroyed this family, not me. And I hung up. No tears, no regret. For the first time in my life, I felt relief. I had lost my family, but maybe they were never truly my family to begin with. That phone call with my mother was the last time I heard her voice. After my post, my family went completely silent. No more angry messages from Nathan, no more furious calls from my father. All contact was severed, as if I had never existed to them. But this time, I didn't feel guilty. I was free. At first, the silence felt unfamiliar. The evenings I used to spend solving my family's financial problems were now mine. No more desperate late-night calls. No more canceled plans because someone needed my help. I threw myself into work, channeling my energy into a major project my company was developing. With laser focus, I not only completed it ahead of schedule, but also secured a promotion. On the day I received my promotion letter, I stood in my new office, looking out over the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows, feeling proud. For the first time in my life, I could enjoy my success without feeling obligated to share it with anyone. And then, I decided to travel. I had always dreamed of taking a long trip, but every time I thought about spending money on myself, I was pulled back into my responsibility. But now, nothing was holding me back. I booked a ticket to Italy. When the plane landed in Florence, I felt like I was stepping into an entirely new world. The cobblestone streets, the outdoor cafes filled with the scent of espresso, the historic buildings whispering stories of the past, it all made me feel more alive than ever before. I wandered through Florence's narrow alleyways, spent hours in museums marveling at Renaissance paintings I had only seen in books. I ate the freshest pasta of my life, sipped rich red wine as the sun set over the terracotta rooftops. I was no longer the person who constantly worried about others. I was no longer my family's bank account. I was just me. One late afternoon, I was sitting in a small cafe near Piazza della Signoria, enjoying a hot cappuccino. "You seem to really like this place." I looked up, meeting the warm gaze of a stranger. He had light brown hair, a relaxed smile, and an effortless confidence. "I think I just fell in love with this city," I replied with a small smile, taking a sip of my coffee. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me without asking, as if we had known each other for years. "Me too," he said. "This is my third time coming back." I raised an eyebrow. "A loyal traveler, huh?" "You could say that. My name's Alex." "Evelyn." We talked for a long time. He was from New York, worked in interior design, and had a deep passion for European architecture. His voice was calm, steady, sometimes laced with effortless humor. I couldn't remember the last time I had talked to someone without pressure, without tension. With Alex, there was no pretense, no expectations, just a simple, chance encounter. A genuine connection between two strangers. As I stood up to leave, he smiled. "If you ever want company while exploring Florence, I'd be happy to join you." I hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I think I'd like that." The next few days felt like a dream. Alex and I wandered through local markets, sampled gelato, and walked along the Arno River as the golden sunset painted the sky. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't probe into my past. He just saw me for who I was in this moment, a woman finally embracing her freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt valued. Not for my money, not for my responsibilities, but just for being me. One evening, as we sat on a rooftop terrace, I gazed at the glowing city lights and smiled to myself. I had once believed that my happiness depended on my family. I had once thought that if I gave enough, they would love me the way I wanted to be loved. But the truth was, I didn't need to beg for love from people who never truly valued me. I could create my own happiness. And right here, under the Italian night sky, I knew I was doing exactly that. After returning from Italy, I stepped back into my life, but with an entirely new mindset. I was no longer the Evelyn who sacrificed everything for a family that never appreciated her. I was stronger, freer, and more myself than ever before. The months that followed were peaceful. Work thrived, I joined Sunday yoga classes, met new friends, and finally embraced the life I had put on hold for too long. But then, news about my old family started to surface. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. A message from Aunt Linda, my mother's cousin. "Evelyn, I know you don't care about the family anymore, but your parents are really struggling. Your father is working night shifts at a warehouse, and your mother is taking hourly cleaning jobs. They both look exhausted." I paused for a moment, staring at the screen. I had seen this coming. When I was financially supporting them, my parents never once considered standing on their own. They relied on me as a lifeline, never stopping to think if I was tired. And now that I had cut them off, they were forced to face reality. I set my phone down without replying. A few days later, I heard from a friend that Nathan had lost his job due to poor performance, and Lucas was still chasing his dream of becoming a social media influencer. But getting nowhere. I wasn't surprised, and I no longer felt responsible for them. They had the chance to change, to learn independence, but they didn't, and now they had to face the consequences of their own choices. I once thought that not spending Christmas with my parents and brothers would make me feel lonely, but as the holiday approached, I realized that I had people who truly cared about me, and that was what mattered most. I decided to host a small gathering at my apartment. Aunt Daisy arrived early, carrying a box of homemade cookies and a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, Evelyn," she said as I welcomed her in. I smiled. "You're the only person in the family who's ever said that to me." Daisy looked at me, her eyes filled with both understanding and sadness. "I just wish they had realized your worth before it was too late." I didn't respond. Instead, I poured her a glass of wine and invited her inside. One by one, my friends arrived, bringing wine, desserts, and laughter. That entire evening, I laughed more than in any Christmas before. No forced conversations. No pressure to meet anyone's expectations. Just me, being happy on my own terms. As the clock struck midnight, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the twinkling Christmas lights across the city, and felt something I had never truly felt before. No more invisible burdens. No more feeling used. Just me, my life, and the people who truly loved me for who I was. And that was the greatest Christmas gift I could ever receive. I sat in my armchair, watching the city lights reflect against my window. Outside, the world kept moving, cars and people filling the glowing streets. But inside me, there was a stillness I had never known before. I had once believed that family was everything, that I had an obligation to sacrifice for them, no matter how they treated me. I had convinced myself that if I tried hard enough, if I gave enough, they would finally accept and love me. But the truth had been far different. Family isn't defined by blood alone. Family is made up of those who appreciate you, those who don't take advantage of you, those who love you without conditions. And my parents, Nathan and Lucas, they had never truly seen me as family in that way. I thought back to the way they cut me out of the will, as if to make a final statement that I was worth nothing to them except for my money. They believed that would break me, that I would beg for their acceptance again. But what they didn't realize was that they had unknowingly given me the greatest gift of all. They had severed the last remaining tie between us. They had set me free. I had once been a woman burdened by responsibility, expectations, and sacrifices that were never appreciated. But now, I had the power to choose my own life. I could go anywhere, do anything, and never again worry about a call demanding money or a guilt trip for not obeying their wishes. I could spend my time with people who truly loved me, friends who stood by me, even when I had nothing left to give. Aunt Daisy, who had quietly supported me all along. I could love and be loved freely, in a way I had never experienced before. My eyes drifted to my phone on the table. There were no missed calls from my family. They had let me go. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of that. I picked up my glass of wine, taking a slow sip, letting its warmth spread through me. I had once lived for my family. Now, I chose to live for myself. And that wasn't selfish. That was freedom. Evelyn's story isn't just personal. It reflects a reality that many people face in society. We grow up believing that family is the safest place, that love always comes with responsibility. But the truth is, family bonds don't always mean appreciation. Sometimes, walking away isn't selfish. It's the only way to protect yourself. When you are constantly being used, when your sacrifices go unrecognized, you have every right to put yourself first. Because in the end, this life is yours. What do you think about Evelyn's story? If you were in her position, would you keep sacrificing for family, or would you walk away to find yourself again? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more meaningful stories about life and family. My name is Isabella, and my story begins when I was 17, during my senior year of high school. I was not the daughter my parents envisioned. They had mapped out my life since I was little: excel in school, go to college, then get a stable office job. That was the dream they had woven for me. But it wasn't mine. I wasn't a straight-A student, but I wasn't lacking intelligence either. I had a creative mind and preferred working with my hands rather than sitting in class, listening to lectures that never interested me. I loved fixing things, crafting, and even decorating spaces. When I told my parents that I wanted to study interior design, my mother was nearly furious. She said it was a terrible choice, that it couldn't compare to a college degree. "What can you do with a job that doesn't require a degree?" my mother would say repeatedly whenever I brought it up. "Why can't you be like the other kids in the neighborhood? Go to college, Get a stable job. That kind of work will only lead you to failure. My father felt the same. Even though he worked tirelessly at the factory, he believed that college was the only path to success. And I couldn't understand why he couldn't see that I wasn't happy doing what he wanted me to do. I couldn't keep living in a place where every step I took was controlled by someone else's desires. So in April, about 6 weeks before graduation, I decided to tell them that I'd been accepted into a short-term interior design course. It wasn't a university, but it was a path I truly wanted. I had earned a partial scholarship based on the projects I'd done. When I said this, my mother's face immediately changed. She cried, not out of concern, but out of disappointment. My father couldn't hold back his anger and immediately shouted, "Do you know what an opportunity is? You're throwing away everything we've done for you. Don't embarrass us." I tried to explain, but my words couldn't soothe them. The feeling of helplessness rose inside me, and I said words I never thought I'd utter. "I can't live my life according to your dreams. I'm old enough to decide for myself." Immediately, a tense silence fell over us. All three of us shouted, hurtful words flying back and forth, no one willing to back down. Finally, my father, his face full of rage, said, "If you don't want to do things our way, then leave. Don't ever come back." I stood there, feeling everything shatter. A part of me wanted to retreat, but another part was too exhausted from the control. I didn't want to live in their shadow anymore. I went upstairs, shoved the essentials into a bag, grabbed all the money I had saved, about $1,500, and headed downstairs. My mother looked at me, tears in her eyes, and said, "You'll come back, right? You'll be back in a month, begging us to take you in." She smirked, as if I'd already lost the battle before it began. My father stood by the door, saying nothing, just glaring at me before slamming the door shut as I walked out. I stood there, in the front yard of the house I grew up in, staring at the place that no longer felt like home, not knowing where to go next. The rain started to pour, like a sign of what was to come. I felt like a character in some depressing movie, but at that moment, I only knew one thing. I wasn't going back. After all, I had made my decision. After leaving the house, I felt like I was standing in the middle of a long road, not knowing where to go. On the outside, I tried to appear strong, but inside the loneliness started to creep in. For the first time in my life, I felt the reality of losing everything. No parents, no home, no safety net. I remembered the arguments over dinner before I decided to leave. My parents had mapped out my life since I was little. They wanted me to go to college, get a stable office job, marry a nice man, and live according to the perfect plan they had laid out. They thought that as long as I followed their wishes, I would succeed and be happy. But I wasn't happy. It was a nightmare for me. I loved working with my hands, building things, fixing things, creating things. I wanted to be a skilled tradesperson, not a girl in a blazer sitting at a desk, listening to lectures that never interested me. But they couldn't understand. Every time I mentioned my dream, my mother would look at me with disappointment, as if I'd just told her I wanted to drop out and become a garbage collector. "You'll regret it, Isabella," my mother would always say. "We can't live our whole lives in a dead-end job. Think about it. Our whole family has worked so hard to give you this opportunity. You can't ruin everything just because of some passing interest." My father didn't say much, but his eyes were always filled with disapproval, as if he were disappointed that I wasn't the daughter he wanted. Every time I talked about trade school, he'd sigh and shake his head. "Is that really what you want to be, Isabella? A regular worker? How do you think people will see you?" I used to feel guilty for not meeting their expectations, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. Once again, I decided to choose my own path. I told them I wanted to study interior design and that I'd been accepted into the program with a scholarship. And that's when everything changed. My mother started crying, not because she was worried about me, but because she felt let down. She couldn't understand why I would choose a path without guarantees. My father, after hearing my decision, slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "You're ruining your life, Isabella. Do you understand that? We can't accept you becoming some low-level worker. You're making everything harder, not just for yourself but for the entire family." Those words felt like a slap to my face. I tried to explain that I wanted to do what I was passionate about, but every word I said only seemed to make them angrier. Finally, my father said the one thing that made it impossible for me to stay. "If you're not going to listen, you can leave right now." That was the moment I decided. I went up to my room, grabbed the bag of clothes I had packed long ago, stuffed a few belongings into it, and walked out without saying another word. My mother called after me, saying I'd come back and apologize in a month, but I didn't look back. I never wanted to see their disappointed faces again. I was old enough to make my own decisions, but things weren't as easy as I thought. In the first days after leaving home, I only had a place to stay because of my friend Corey. Corey helped me in those initial days, but I couldn't stay there forever. I had to fend for myself, find a job, and try to survive. I had to face countless challenges, from finding a place to stay to making enough money to get by. Every day felt like a battle, but I never wanted to prove them right. I couldn't let my mother's and father's words become the truth. They thought I'd come crawling back, but I didn't. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going back. As I stepped outside, it felt like a part of my life had shattered. Standing in the rain, clutching the small bag of belongings I had hastily thrown together, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. My mother said I'd be back in a month, but I knew I wouldn't. I couldn't keep living under their control and expectations. I was too exhausted, and I knew I deserved a life of my own, not one dictated by dreams that weren't mine. At that moment, I had nothing except the $1,200 I had saved from part-time jobs. It wasn't much, but at least it would keep me afloat for a couple of weeks. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't just stand there. I called Corey, the only friend I could rely on, and thankfully, Corey let me stay for a few days. Even though it was just temporary, at least I had somewhere to escape the chaos inside me. During those first days at Corey's place, I couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, a burden in my friend's home. But Corey never judged me. He kept saying I'd figure things out as long as I stayed determined. He helped me apply for emergency assistance because, technically, I was still a minor, without family support, so I was eligible. Still, living on my own wasn't easy. I'd started working 2 jobs to make ends meet. One at a hardware store in the afternoons, and another washing dishes at a diner on weekends. The long days wore me out, both physically and mentally. Every night, when I returned to the tiny rented room, I felt like I was living a life that no one understood. Many times, I wanted to give up and go back home, to apologize and pretend to be the daughter they wanted. But then I'd remember my mother's words, "You'll come crawling back in a month." Those words stung like a slap to the face. No, I wouldn't go back. Not because I was stubborn, but because I couldn't live under their control any longer. As time went by, my life gradually became more stable. I started earning enough to support myself, buying my own food and paying rent without relying on anyone. I also learned how to manage my money, cook for myself, and do things I never thought I could. Life wasn't easy, but at least I was moving forward. One day, while working at the hardware store, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was my mother. I swallowed hard, unsure of what she wanted. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it. I picked up. "Isabella, are you okay?" My mother's voice was soft, lacking the anger and scorn it once had. "I'm fine," I replied curtly, feeling a wave of discomfort wash over me. She sighed before saying, "Your father lost his job. We don't know what to do. Can you help us out a little?" I didn't know how to respond. Hearing those words, I felt a hollow emptiness in my chest. After everything they did to me, now they wanted my help. A part of me felt the urge to help because, after all, they were still my parents. But another part of me was filled with resentment. They hadn't thought about me in so long, hadn't cared about my life. They only remembered me when they needed something. "I can't help you, Mom. I'm taking care of myself now," I said firmly. My mother was silent for a moment. Then she simply said, "I understand, honey. I just want you to know that we still love you." A surge of anger and disappointment rose inside me. I had fought so hard, working 2 jobs just to stand on my own feet, while they lived comfortably under the roof they had chosen. All I wanted to do at that moment was hang up, to not hear another word. "I'll call you back," I said, then ended the call. Conversations like that left me feeling drained, conflicted, and uncertain of what to do. But in the end, I had made my choice long ago. Those first months living on my own, I felt like I was walking down a dark, foggy road. No family support. No one to share my struggles with. Everything weighed on my shoulders. Each morning, I woke up exhausted, but I couldn't stop. If I stopped, I wouldn't know where to go next. I worked 2 jobs, selling hardware in the afternoons and waitressing at a coffee shop on weekends. At first, the job at the hardware store was manageable, but once I added the cafe shifts, my life became a series of long, tiring days. While others my age were going to the movies, hanging out with friends, or spending time with family, I was alone in my tiny rented room, drowning in design course materials, dreaming of a future I still believed was possible. Working hard wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the loneliness, the absence of conversations with family. Sometimes, when I saw pictures of my friends' families, I felt an indescribable emptiness. I missed the family dinners, the meaningless arguments, my mother's constant scolding, and my father's disappointed looks. But now, all I had was myself. Every time I called my mother, I could hear her voice quiver, as if she wanted me to come back. But I couldn't. No matter how much I loved them, I couldn't keep living in the cycle of control and expectations they had created for me. I had done everything to break free from their shadow, and now I couldn't go back. I couldn't let them dictate my life anymore. Life now felt like a never-ending battle. I struggled through each day and night. Sometimes I felt completely exhausted, but whenever I thought about my mother and the things she said, I pushed away the negative thoughts. I couldn't go back. No matter how tough it got, I wouldn't let them be right. I would prove to them that I could live well without their help. Sometimes, I questioned if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered how freeing it felt to walk out that door. I couldn't keep living under their control, pretending to be the daughter they wanted me to be. I wanted to live my own life, a life where I made my own choices and decisions. On tired mornings, when the sunlight peeked through the window of my tiny rented room, I remembered the dreams I once had. I wanted to become an interior designer, to work in a creative environment where I could fully express my skills. Although I hadn't achieved it yet, I knew that every step, no matter how small, was still a step forward. Day by day, I continued to work hard. I didn't have time to dwell on the past or what had happened. I focused on my work, my training, and the things I could control. The sleepless nights spent completing assignments, the exhausting days spent searching for clients for small design projects. They all became an integral part of my life. One afternoon, as I was sitting in a coffee shop, taking an order from a client, my phone vibrated. It was a message from my mother. "Are you okay? I miss you." For the first time in months, I felt something inside me soften. But I didn't reply right away. I knew I had to stay strong. If I answered, I feared I'd give in and go back to everything I had decided I couldn't accept. I stared at the screen for a while, then put the phone down. My mother wouldn't understand. But I couldn't let myself be dragged backward. I was too tired of the constraints, the never-ending demands from my family. I needed to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it was. Eventually, I picked up the phone and typed a short message. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm working and learning. I'll be okay." Then I hit send and set the phone down. I knew that one day I would go back, but not to apologize, only to stand firmly on my own 2 feet. My life gradually changed after those exhausting months of working and feeling lonely. At first, all I felt was fatigue and emptiness. But slowly, my perseverance began to pay off. I vividly remember the sleepless nights when my eyes burned from a full day of working at the hardware store and the coffee shop. But I couldn't afford to stop. Step by step, I started to realize that I had made it through the toughest days. It was time to start looking for a real opportunity. One day, while I was working at the hardware store, I ran into Santiago, the man who had helped me find some materials for a small project a few months back. Back then, he was just a regular customer, but now, he was the one who would completely change my life. He asked if I was interested in working on home repair and renovation projects. It was an unbelievable opportunity. Santiago was a skilled tradesman who had been in the construction and repair business for years. He wasn't just a great mentor, but also a friend who was always willing to share his knowledge and experience. He recognized my potential in design and decor and gave me the chance to work on more substantial projects. The work not only paid better, but also allowed me to learn and grow in the field I was passionate about. The first few days working with Santiago were a major turning point for me. I didn't just learn new skills, I got to practice them on real projects. Gradually, I became more confident in my work. I was no longer the confused, frightened young woman facing every challenge with uncertainty. Clients started complimenting me on my work, and for the first time, I felt valued, something I hadn't felt in years. Under Santiago's guidance, I didn't just improve my design skills, I also learned how to manage projects and communicate with clients. Slowly but surely, I began to get my own design contracts and life started to stabilize. I no longer had to worry about taking temporary jobs just to make ends meet. Instead, I felt confident in the path I had chosen, without needing my family or anyone else to support me. A year later, after completing my training program and receiving my certification, my life was completely different. I had a steady job, a small but cozy apartment, and I no longer felt lonely. The new friends I had met through work became like family. They weren't just colleagues. They were the people who had been there for me during the hardest times. I will never forget the moment I looked around my apartment for the first time. A space I had furnished and decorated entirely with the money I earned doing the work I loved. It was a feeling that words couldn't describe. I had built this life on my own, without my parents' help, without living under their expectations or pressure. I felt free, in control, and ready to decide my own future. Then, one day, as I was working at home, my phone rang again. It was my mother. This time, I wasn't sure what to expect. After a few seconds of hesitation, I decided to pick up. "Isabella, are you okay?" My mother's voice was softer than it had been in the past. I wasn't sure how to respond, but I decided to answer with confidence, without any hint of weakness. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm working and doing well." My mother was silent for a moment, then continued, her voice slightly hesitant. "We just want to know what you're doing and if there's anything we can do to help." I could sense a change in her tone. No more scolding, no more disappointment. But I also knew they still couldn't fully understand my choices. I told my mother that I had found the work I loved and no longer needed their help. It was time for me to keep moving forward on my own. After hanging up, I sat there, reflecting on the call. Maybe my parents still didn't truly understand me, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was that I had found my passion, my work, and the life I had always wanted. I no longer felt afraid when thinking about the future, because I knew I could build everything on my own. And I also realized that even if they never fully understood, I didn't need to prove anything to them. I was building my own life, and that was the most important thing. One morning, as I was preparing breakfast in my apartment, my phone suddenly rang. It was my mother. My heart tightened. After all this time, she still hadn't genuinely asked how I was doing. She only reached out when she needed something. I stared at the phone for a moment, then decided to pick up. "How are you, Isabella?" My mother's voice was soft but distant, as if nothing had happened between us. "I'm fine," I replied curtly, trying to keep my voice calm. There was a brief silence before she continued. "You know, your father still doesn't have a job, and we're struggling. Can you help us a little?" A bitter feeling rose in my chest. After all these years, they had never really checked on me, never truly cared about my life. And now, when they needed money, they called with a sorrowful tone, as if everything had changed. I knew they only needed me to solve a temporary problem, and then they'd go back to living in their own bubble. I didn't respond right away. I remained silent for a moment. Then, trying to stay patient, I said, "I'm doing okay, but I can't help you financially. I'm taking care of myself now." My mother didn't give up. She continued, her voice sounding a bit flustered. "I understand, honey, but you know, we're family. Family is supposed to help each other. I just want you to do your duty. I always hoped you'd come back, but if you can't, at least help a little." It felt like a slap in the face. Those words made it seem like everything was my responsibility. Why did I have to carry the burden? Why did I have to be the one to save the family when they had never been there for me when I needed them? I hung up without saying another word, feeling furious. But I soon realized it wasn't over. The next day, as I was scrolling through social media, I saw a post from my mother. My heart almost stopped when I read it. Family is everything. No matter what, we must stick together through hard times. My daughter Isabella has become independent, but the family still needs her. We miss her so much, and hope she understands and helps us during this difficult time. Reading those words felt like being cornered, forced to respond. The way my mother used social media to apply pressure on me made me feel exploited. She knew I was following her, knew I'd see the post, and she hoped I'd feel guilty enough to come back and help. Those words weren't genuine concern. They were just a way to make me feel obligated to return, bringing with me the compassion I once had for my family. But I was too tired of these games. I couldn't let myself be pulled back into such manipulation. The next day, my mother called again. I didn't pick up. Instead, I typed a brief message. "Mom, I know you need help, but I can't come back. I can't keep living the life you chose for me. I'm independent now, and I need to keep moving forward." After hitting send, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. I no longer felt the pressure to live up to anyone else's expectations. But soon, the calls started coming in from my siblings and other family members. They all asked about my mother's post, trying to convince me to help. One day, I received a text from my brother, saying that Mom had cried because of her post and begged me to come back. But I wasn't swayed. I had come too far to start over, and I couldn't go back. I had built my life from nothing, and I couldn't let the guilt and old expectations pull me back. I decided not to respond anymore. My life was no longer tied to what they wanted me to be. I had built an independent life, and I would continue down the path I had chosen. A month after deciding not to return, my life had begun to stabilize. I had landed a good job at a major interior design firm, and gradually, I could support myself without worrying about money. I had my own apartment, good friends, and a job I truly loved. Finally, I felt like I was on the path I wanted, a path that wasn't shaped by anyone else's expectation. But then, one day, my mother called again. This time, her tone was different. There was no blame or request for financial help, just a somber, concerned voice. "Isabella, we need to talk," she said, her voice slightly choked. "Your father and we've thought a lot about what happened. We know we were wrong in how we treated you. We don't want you to feel pushed away from the family anymore. Can you meet with us just once?" I didn't respond immediately. My emotions were all over the place. After all these years, they had finally acknowledged their mistakes. But could I forgive them and open up to them again? After all this time, I had learned how to stand on my own, and now, I didn't want anyone coming back to control my life. I took a deep breath and replied, "Okay, Mom, but only if you and Dad agree to one condition. I won't help if you don't respect my boundaries. I can't go back to living like we did before." There was a brief silence before my mother said, "We will respect that, Isabella. We're willing to change." The meeting took place the following weekend. I met my parents at a quiet cafe. They sat there, looking at me with faces that were no longer stern but rather anxious and uncertain. My mother gently took my hand as I sat down, and my father just looked at me, waiting for me to say something. "We know we were wrong," my mother began. "We put all our expectations on you and never let you make your own choices. We're truly sorry. Your father and I understand now that you've grown up and don't need us to decide for you anymore. But we're still family, and we want to start over." I looked into my mother's eyes. Those words weren't new to me, but this time I sensed a sincerity in her voice. Forgiving wasn't easy, but I knew that if I didn't give them this chance, I'd never be able to move forward. "I forgive you, Mom and Dad," I said softly but firmly. "But if we're going to start over, I need you to respect my life and my choices. I can't go back to living the way we did before. I'm independent now, and I don't want to be controlled or pressured anymore." My father nodded. "We will respect that, Isabella. We want you to feel free, and we're ready to change." So, after that meeting, I decided to help them once. I paid to help them keep their house. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the only way to help them without feeling overwhelmed by unrealistic expectations. However, I made it clear that they had to change, that they needed to attend family therapy sessions where we could openly express our feelings without feeling judged. My parents agreed. And from that point on, our family dynamics began to shift. They attended therapy, worked on improving relationships, and learned to respect each other's boundaries. It was a long and challenging process, but small improvements began to show. They no longer tried to control me, and I no longer felt trapped by their expectations. For me, the most important thing was that I hadn't returned to living under their control. I had built a stable, fulfilling life that I had chosen. I could work in the field I loved, live freely, and do what I wanted without fear of judgment. Even though my family had changed, I remained committed to living life on my terms, no longer allowing anyone to decide for me. Our relationship couldn't go back to how it was, but at least I had managed to build a life I was proud of. Each day, I felt stronger, not just because I had survived the tough times, but because I had dared to live authentically. Now, I have built a stable, independent, and fulfilling life. While my relationship with my family has seen some improvements, I still maintain the boundaries I set. I've learned how to stand on my own 2 feet and not let anyone, even my family, dictate my life. Through this journey, I've realized that perseverance and living true to oneself are the keys to building a meaningful and free life. What do you think of Isabella's journey? What would you do if you were in her situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to hear more stories about family life and positive changes.